Welcome to today's episode of What to Say and How to Say It, the podcast to help you fix your marriage. I'm Shai Lewis. I'm here with Nina Rosner. Our mission is to help you, Christian married man or woman, navigate conflict and build connection so you can have a thriving marriage. So today our topic is 3 things to stop doing to save your marriage. All right, so we get a lot of clients, coaching clients. We also get course members that join our e-course where they come to us in what we would call crisis mode. The house is on fire, people are in the hospital, there's wounding everywhere. And typically that creates this need to do something and take control or fix it or, just stop the fire, basically. But oftentimes that actually does the opposite of what you're seeking. And so we want to talk about that today and what this looks like and maybe some things you should stop doing. But before we get into that, we want you guys to head over to our website, greaterimpactwives.org, and download a free PDF called 5 Tools for How to Stop Walking on Eggshells. We think it will help you out and maybe you might sign up for coaching at some point. Okay, so all right, if you don't do this well, you can actually make things worse because you're going to be getting in your own way at some point because you're doing the same thing you've been doing all along, which hasn't been helpful. All right, welcome, Nina. What are your thoughts on this topic?
It's really a common thing. People, they don't take care of their marriage. And the next thing they know, they're in this slide where the marriage is being damaged and they don't seek help until things are so bad that somebody's close to just wanting it to be over. They want to escape. And maybe they don't want divorce yet, or separation, but they want the pain to stop. So, and it's an interesting thing. Like I talk to a lot of women whose husbands who have checked out. And that's not super common. Usually, they're still engaged in some way, shape, or form, but it seems like we've been seeing a lot of relationships where the husband's saying, I'm done. I really just am finished with this whole thing. And what's happened is the wife has been trying to get him to participate in the relationship. So she's chasing him around the house, demanding that he communicate with her. She's, yeah, and she's doing all the stuff like instigating all these things and trying to force him to participate. And what she doesn't know is that that has the exact opposite effect. But it is our natural tendency.
Mhm.
I had a conversation with a couple of pastors last week, actually, where the wife was working with me and she said, my pastors want to talk to you because the advice you're giving me is completely different than what they're telling me to do. They want me to have a confrontation with him and demand that he do XYZ and step into his role as leader of our family, or I'm going to divorce him. And I said, well, you can do that. But everything that you've indicated to me is showing that he'll be fine with that decision because it's more of the same. It's chase, it's push.
Mhm.
So I talked to the pastors, and it was really interesting because the man, I was very respectful in how I approached that, and I said I think we have a difference of approach with this, and I don't want to step on toes or anything, but I'm curious as to what you think his reaction is going to be if she does that. And he goes, well, he needs to get into that role. And I said, you're not wrong. I said, are you open to hearing what I think he needs to do also? And he said, well, yeah. And I said, okay, I think he needs somebody to witness his pain. I think he's hurting. I think he's been suffering a lot of judgment and people telling him what to do, which is making him dig his heels in. And he wants no part of stepping up to anything because he's just pushed so far, he's ready to get off the cliff, right? And so and what was interesting was the the pastor said, I remember 18 years ago when my wife and I were separated and people were doing that to me, and it made me want nothing to do with it. You're not wrong. That's a thing.
Wow.
Yeah, but it took tapping into his prior experience, and everybody means well, right?
Right.
The
Yeah.
mother-in-law and the father-in-law and the father, and they're like telling people what they should do, and it never works. And the
Yep.
wife, especially, telling her husband, well, you need to be a man and you need to like, and I've done that. I have
Mhm.
absolutely done that, and it's the wrongest thing ever. It makes everything worse.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's so interesting how you say everyone's trying to help, but they're doing the exact opposite of what is actually helpful. And I'm just wondering, what is it in us that makes us like forget that? Is it that we think we're smarter than what we are? Or it's like, panic in the
Mhm.
situation, because I do think this is a common problem, like you said, and I think it's increasing now, no fault divorce, women in the workplace, it's two incomes, and it's like so many things contributing to this.
Mhm.
But the church just at some point is just as clueless as the world.
Oh,
It's
it's so frustrating to me. A lot of the women that I work with, they'll go to their pastors and they'll meet with them over and over, for 6, 8 months, whatever. And finally the pastor's like, I don't know, I think you should file for divorce. And I don't know what that's about, but they don't know what to do.
yeah.
And there is a very clear path to putting something like this back together. And we've done it. We've helped people walk it. But if you get off the path and you get controlling again, or if you're operating in fear, trying to
Mm,
make somebody do a thing, you're just going to create more rebellion, or resistance, right? So radical acceptance around that's where they're at. And that first point is, to stop getting our identity from their behavior towards us.
mm,
That's that yearning ache that, okay, I haven't heard from him in 2 days, or he hasn't texted me today at work, and I just need to see something. I just need to, and there's a welling up of something. And so they'll text, they'll instigate conversation and expect something back, and it doesn't happen. Well, that then tips them over further. Is this, but that's their identity being wrapped up in his reaction response to them. And so what we see people commonly do is they chase more. They go after more.
mm.
It's push, push, push. And then the only thing is we need to talk about the problems, and so there's pressure, and we need to talk about the marriage. We need to talk. That phrase is like how to instill fear in men is say we need to talk. But they resist that. And the more women push for that, the more likely they are to get the resistance and set up an environment where things are going the wrong direction.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's also some things not, well, there's some things underneath that,
Mhm.
because I think, like you said, there's that fear component because the identity is wrapped up there. But there's also, I think, just everyday things, everyday decisions that may not be made because of this breach that exists now,
Mhm.
that might also be causing that fear and that panic to escalate. And so I'm wondering, how does one adjust themselves in that space where, okay, communication isn't happening, it's not a good idea for me to chase, but there's some real legitimate needs that need to be met here, or things that
Yeah.
need to happen, whether it's a kid problem or maybe it's a doctor appointment and you're sick and you can't drive yourself, or something like just normal everyday things that normally your spouse might do for you or help out with that isn't happening at that moment.
Yeah, it's really, really hard.
Hmm.
But the recommendation is to give them space. Don't ask for anything.
Hmm.
Back off. And that means, and it's a good test for this is what divorce is like. I'm on my own.
Yeah.
I'm responsible for all this stuff now. And then I'm responsible for this ache within me as well. And so how do I navigate this stuff? And so the other piece of advice that we have is to not ask for anything. And here's why, okay? The partner and maybe you too, are in this mental state defined by Dr. John Gottman out of University of Washington as negative sentiment override, where everything anybody does is wrong. You know, if somebody can take the garbage out and they didn't do it soon enough, you know. And there's this not awesome piece of connection that's not happening. And so when you have negative sentiment override, the most important thing to do is neutralize the environment. So that's where this don't ask for anything comes in.
Mhm.
Stop. Yeah, you have
Instigating.
radical acceptance. What's that?
Stop instigating
Yeah.
communication and yeah.
Yeah, don't call, don't text, be sweet when they're there. But basically, the point of that is to neutralize the environment. And that causes people to have a little bit of pause, like, oh, this is easy now. Okay. And they may not know why, and they may not have noticed.
Mm.
Okay. If men typically don't notice. Um, and it's not because they're terrible, it's just, they're not as relationship focused as women are. Like, that's just true. Okay. When you analyze what people talk about, the women are talking about relational stuff. That's just bottom line truth.
Mm.
So when you take the pressure off, then what you're doing is creating space for God to work.
Mm. Hello.
Duh. Yeah. Hello. That's huge. Yeah. And then men like there's this characteristic about men, and it shows up in the big five personality index, where men are more aggressive than women are. And that sounds like a negative thing. It's like, oh, toxic masculinity. It's like, well, yeah, maybe if they're a bad person, but aggression is, I'm going to take action on something, I'm going to initiate. And women who respond to their husbands instead of constantly pushing them to do stuff, but create opportunity by asking questions, where the man is allowed to walk in his manhood by initiating, then it's incredible what happens there. We've lost femininity in our culture, you
Yep.
know. Yeah, vital smarts, nobody likes this, but there's this statistic that just is brutal. When women say direct things using the same exact words and the same tonation as men, they're
Mhm.
perceived 37 times more negatively than men are. And it's because culturally, we're seen as nurturing, agreeable creatures. And when we act outside of that, we're viewed negatively. And that comes into play in our marriage. That doesn't mean you don't get to get what you want. It means the way you go about that matters. So if you're bossy and direct, you're not going to get what you want. And men feel like you're parenting them when you do that. So it's not wise.
Wow, that's so good, so necessary. And I love what you said that men are able to walk in their manhood by initiating. And gosh, how can he initiate if you're doing all the initiating? So,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, it's something we just, I don't know. It just goes out of the window. And I'm sure it has a lot to do with just running a house. I mean,
Mhm.
it's like you got to get some things done. You're on a schedule typically, and we're the ones that are probably most aware of that. So
Mhm.
it's easy
Yep.
for us to be like bossy, like you said, but um, that often leads to the house being on fire if you're not careful. So,
So true. And it's amazing, you have a lot of women that'll say, well, he never does anything. He just lays on the couch. He goes to work all day and then he comes home and lays on the couch. That's a learned helplessness position because he's learned that it doesn't matter what I do, it's not good enough. So why try?
mhm,
Men that take action on things, men will take action on stuff when they have a good reason to. And they really want to please their wives. They really do, most of them. And then the other thing they really want is peace.
mhm.
And so a huge, huge way to neutralize negative sentiment override is stop criticizing and complaining.
Mm.
That's a huge deal. You're making the environment negative when you do that. It's bad for your brain. You get stuck in it.
So that's the third point. Stop criticizing and complaining.
Mhm.
And that's such a lazy way, right, to get what we need. We talk about that all the time and how, we often revert to just whining about our situation because it's just easy to do
Mhm.
that. We do it as babies, as toddlers, and as adults. We
Yep.
all do it. What is a better way, in your opinion, to get our needs met
Mhm.
instead of complaining or
Yeah.
criticizing?
So it's a process. You neutralize the environment by stop asking for stuff and stop complaining and criticizing for a while. Don't initiate things. Just do things on your own for a while. I know that sounds brutal, and it is, but you neutralize the environment. So after a couple weeks of that, you hit him with an affirmation statement.
Mm.
Yeah. I really admire it when you consistently, reliably go to work every day. Thank you for providing for us. And you speak to his character. And if you can get into things that are not just what he does, but about who he is as a human,
Mm.
you're very generous. I was thinking about just how you interact with all of us, and you're just so kind and generous with your time. That speaks to his character. Those things are there. When we're in negative sentiment override, we lose the ability to see them. But if we start focusing on that, it doesn't take much. They're starving for that. At work, nobody's telling them anything good. They're just hearing about all the problems and getting criticized and negative feedback there as well. Nobody talks to them unless they need something. So,
Wow.
so at home, if we can make an environment that is safe,
Mm-hmm.
relaxing, building up, encouraging, like that changes the relationship. And women are like, oh, it's all on us. It's like, well, yeah, because we're relational. Like, we are the heart of the home. And you can choose to not like it. But if you look at the basic man, and I don't mean to sound critical here, but he's not equipped to be the heart of the home. That's that's not in their makeup and genetics to do that, to nurture and like they're never going to carry a baby. They're not going to bond with somebody through eye contact.
Mm.
They're not going to stare into a baby's eyes for 10 minutes and be head over heels in love with them. They will love their children, absolutely, but it looks different. It just is different. And they interact with them through, when the kids get a little bit older, that's when they start being better fathers, is because they can do something with this thing here. They don't know. It's like, what do we do here? Yeah. It's not a mutually gratifying relationship for most men, like it is when you have a toddler or a 3-year-old that can, climb a tree or something like that with you, build a fort or whatever. Because men bond through the hormone vasopressin. And that is by conquering something, solving a problem, all of that. You can't do that with a baby. It doesn't happen.
Can't conquer a baby.
Nope.
That's so interesting. And I think part of, yeah, this whole thing or the issues we're seeing is because women think men think like we think.
Yeah.
And like that whole thing that they're starving for that validation doesn't even occur to a lot of us because
Mhm.
we don't necessarily need that or we get it from other places. And so it's almost like you have to be intentional about
Yes,
it.
you do. Yeah. And women will compliment each other just like, I mean, it's just part
Yeah.
of their makeup. Oh, you look so pretty. Oh, I love your eyeliner. Oh, your shirt is so beautiful. You
Yeah.
are rocking that hat today, man. You are stunned. Like women do that all the time to each other.
Yeah.
We don't do that to
To
men.
our men. No.
No, no, we don't. Yeah.
Wow.
And they need it.
They need it. It sounds like even more than
Yeah.
we
They're
do.
starving for it. And most affairs, when the man has the affair,
Hmm.
and I'm not blaming women for this, it's his bad choice, no joke, because he could choose to suffer through the lack of affirmation and suffer through the lack of connection he has with his wife when he's just getting criticized all the time. But what is like 100% of the situations that I've seen where there's an affair taking place, the home environment has been challenging. And what happens is some woman somewhere makes a compliment and that gets his attention. Now, if he's a good man, he's going to go, oh, I need to pay attention to my marriage. Something's not right. Right. If he's, I mean, it's just, oh, here's a temptation. I'm going to dive in. You know,
Mhm.
that's a thing. So, and I don't want to sound like I'm judging people. There's other factors that come into play in that whole situation for sure. And yes, there are philandering men. There are men that they're just wired. Most of them are wired to have multiple relationships, actually. But the way that successful women that I've talked to, and this isn't the only way, but if you're the one that's the safest and you're his best friend and you're going to build him up, and he's going to want to, if he feels like he wants to talk to you when any good thing or any bad thing happens, if you're the first person he thinks of, like that's what you want to keep your marriage together. You don't get that by criticizing. You don't get that by controlling and bossing and complaining and all of, like, no, that doesn't happen through that venue. You have to think differently and move forward in a way that is attractive and drawing, strength and dignity style, right? Where you woo them into a space.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
yeah,
Mhm.
it's not easy and it's harder to do, I think, in our culture today because we're when you're managing people and you're working and there's more directness in our communication patterns as women. And even at work, we're viewed more negatively, but that's an environment where we can get away with it,
Right.
you know?
Right.
Yeah.
It's encouraged, in fact, if you want to be a leader, to be
Yep.
more of that. So it's
Mhm.
very counter cultural to the home. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
all right. One last question. You mentioned how important, I mean, we've been talking about how important this is and how intentional we have to be with our communication. But what if you feel like you're not really being honest? What if you
Mhm.
feel like it's inauthentic because maybe he has given someone else attention he should not have,
Yeah.
and there's been other bad behavior, and to compliment or affirm or validate just does not feel honest.
Yeah. I get that, man. When you're hurting and then somebody tells you, go be kind to the person that hurt you. Go be gentle and respectful to the person that is that emptied your bank account and and lied to you, took all the money out of the 401k. So it comes down to what kind of person am I? How do I treat people, whether they deserve it or not? And so then that
Mhm.
moves into what kind of boundaries do I have? Because should I trust this person? Hello, no. If they're doing stuff, you don't trust them. So if your husband's having sex with another woman, there's a boundary that needs to be there for health reasons, obviously. Hello. Like, darling, this store will be open again when that one closes. Like, you know, I love you, but this is not a thing. I want to see that, but right now, you no. And it's risky. It's risky, but if he's taking everything out of your checking account, like why do you keep putting your paycheck in there? You know, Close the account, open a different one, like for real, and have some boundaries. It's like, I love you and I'm doing this because I want to see you take care of us,
Mhm.
and then I'm going to trust you again.
Mhm.
But right now we have some issues with that. So trust can be earned, but respect, kindness should always be, right?
Mhm.
We don't
Mhm.
have to act like a mad 4-year-old to get our point across. And the other piece of this, and it is a challenge. I mean, it is a challenge, but that's our flesh and the enemy in the way of it because the Holy Spirit sees what's good. God loves that person.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so God sees what's good in them. And yeah, I had somebody that her husband had an affair, and she said, I don't, I don't think I can compliment him. And it's like, yeah, I know, right? But what does he do every day? Well, he's still going to work and he's still paying for our lives. And I'm like, okay, so that makes him trustworthy. She's like, what? I said, okay, in that space,
Right.
he's trustworthy. He's
Mhm.
reliable. He's responsible. You can trust him to get up and go to work. He's not pretending that he has a job and has been fired. Those people exist. So what are you going to pay attention to? That's what's going to grow. You keep talking about the affair that he had and, beat him up again over it. Like, that's not going to get you into the relationship that you want. An affair is a symptom of what was happening in the home or a major character flaw in somebody that's, got a big weakness, right? Because they're breaking a covenant that they have with the Lord. So those are things that need to be worked through, but the way that we work through them best is through love. And you need boundaries. They're not against each other. You don't, people think that if you walk in love that you're a doormat. And it's like, no, you're not hanging on a cross for somebody. Jesus did that,
Mhm.
you know?
Right.
Yeah.
And setting boundaries isn't easy. I know we talk about this a lot, but you start small and then you move the needle as
Mhm.
needed. And we have tons of content around boundary setting. Speaking of, if you want to check out more information, check out our next episode where we talk about conflict and boundary setting and what to say and how to say it. So, just to quickly summarize today's conversation, if the house is on fire, people are wounded and you just really need help, maybe try stop doing these three things. Stop getting your identity from your spouse, stop instigating communication, and then stop criticizing and complaining and see what that does for you. If you need more help, we actually have an e-course called Strength and Dignity that is available for you actually on two platforms, Facebook and Circle. And then we also have some coaching we can offer you. Nina does coaching through Greater Impact. She has other coaches that are available as well for you. So go to our website and you'll find out more on how to get that if you need it. So thanks for joining today. And yeah, check out our next episode. We'll see you next time.